Hello my beautiful co-creators, Lilu here on the beautiful Juicy Living Tour, 12 months tour around the US and Canada and Hawaii, and today I'm in Eugene, Oregon with Dr. Chirac. Hello!
Hi!
Thank you for accepting this interview.
Well, thank you for asking.
And speaking of a topic that really matters, actually the biggest topic of it all, love. And you wrote a book, Why Love Heals.
Yes.
And tell us how you got to writing this book, because this is a national bestseller, but you had before that another book. Tell us about your whole story and how this unfolds, and really you came to now speaking about love and how love and why love heals.
Okay, thanks. Firstly, I must say that a lot of this was a true revelation to me. You know, I'm trained as a scientist, and my specialty was mind-body medicine, and I was director of mind-body medicine for a group of 40 cancer centers. And I was very curious about the will to live, and could it affect quality of life and potentially people's length of lives with cancer. And so I was fortunate early in my career to intern with Carl Simonton, who was one of the true pioneers in what we call psychosocial cancer care. And Carl's early research had demonstrated that it could actually affect length of life with all stages and all types of cancer. But the research was not methodologically that sound, and when it's new and different, it wasn't that well accepted. But it was very well accepted by the public, and then someone like Bernie Siegel comes along and really popularizes this. Anyhow, I was in this position to test and use Carl's program. And we found after my teaching it for about 7 years, we looked back and researched it, and where we were based at that time was where Penn State University is, a major university. And someone from their biobehavioral health department was very interested in what I was doing, so he proposed how we could gather the data and literally measure whether or not it affected survival. And so we were very, very pleasantly surprised to find that with stage 1 breast and stage 1 prostate cancer, that in fact the women who had gone through my program within that time period we measured, none of my women died, but 12% of the control group died. And 14% of the men in my group died in that same time period, but twice as many, 28% died in the control group. So we published that research, and then I wrote my first book, Doctor's Orders, Go Fishing, about the importance of doing what you love, which I know is a favorite subject of yours. And that indeed it affected people's health in a very significant way. But what was fascinating in this discovery process is that most of my patients found it too selfish to go fishing, to do what they really love to do. Their conditioning was everybody else, everything else comes first. So if they weren't going fishing, if it wasn't really the will to live that was making the difference, why did they live longer? And so that was a unique challenge when Dr. Larry Dossey and Dr. Gene Ochterberg, who were editors of the journal who published my research, asked me to comment clinically, which is unusual. Usually you just have to cite lots of other research. So why is it that these people live longer after 12 hours of my program? And that's when I explained to them that in my position as I would go from cancer center to cancer center teaching this program, and over time to thousands of people, is okay, so what about the program really helped you, and even what didn't? And so to shorten this, in the end, they said that it was because I listened, I cared, and I was sincere. I cannot tell you how unprepared I was for that. I taught them stress management, guided imagery, the will to live, and so forth. But in the end, I had to conclude it wasn't any specific coping skill I taught them. It was that they felt loved and cared for, which so conformed with Dean Ornish's research with heart disease. And then as I went on to write Why Love Heals, because it sounds nice, love heals. But scientifically, and in working in cancer centers, I wanted to really understand this. So for me as well as for the public, why does love heal? And then there was a psychologist, James Lynch, who also discovered after 30 years of research preceding Dean Ornish's that loneliness really underlies heart disease. And when you feel heard and understood, when there's heartfelt communication, that made the difference. So all of a sudden now my research and work I was feeling more comfortable with, because just to say love heals cancer, again, I'm not sure you can fully appreciate as the scientist that wasn't going to work so well when you're dealing with oncologists and actually the public. So I was pleased to have this opportunity to really look closely and gather a lot of data that explained why love heals.
So what kind of data did you find?
Well,
how did you measure that?
Well, I know of your interest in quantum physics, so that was probably key for me, beyond Dean Ornish's research and James Lynch in particular, was when I started to study privately quantum physics, even though in my doctoral dissertation, so long before this, many years ago, my specialty was guided imagery. I had a lot of personal experience with using guided imagery to heal my own health conditions, that I was convinced it wasn't that, but something was doing it. So I went back to school. That's why I went back to graduate school and discovered that, oh my God, your mind is way more powerful than we have any idea. I don't care how powerful people think it is, it's more. So in the process of doing that, and then having to explain, we say hypotheses, why guided imagery works, I generated 10, and looking at all the research literature, here is why it is proposed that guided imagery actually works. And the 10th hypothesis I saved for last because it was quantum physics. And I wasn't sure how comfortable people would be, even my professors, looking at the data, although all I'm doing is reporting the data, that this is really how, or at least an explanation potentially why guided imagery works. But what was fascinating was to discover that, one, quantum physics says that everything is entirely connected, that underlying all of our physical reality as we understand it is an energy matrix of harmony and order. And honestly, in the end, one physicist in particular, David Bohm, said we could call it love. The energy that literally underlies all of physical reality is one of love. Then, on top of that, but I think it was 1918 when Max Planck received his Nobel Prize in Physics for discovering this quantum energy that underlies all of physical matter. But by 1933, 3 other physicists had been awarded the Nobel Prize in Physics for discovering not only this connectedness of everything, but that this field, this quantum field, is formless. It's only a field of potential energy and only takes form when consciousness is introduced. And all of a sudden now, why does guided imagery work? When you are resonating with this field of love and then introduce consciousness, it literally creates whatever it is you're focused on. And now, as far as I can determine, that is absolutely the truth of it, as I've gone on through other perspectives as well to examine, so how could this be true?
So this takes few people. This takes the patient, this takes you to open your heart also and to connect to this field or be consciously working together.
Yes, in fact...
It's not just a matter of...
Yeah. Well, actually it is in a way, because whether or not we're consciously projecting a thought or an image, it's happening all the time. And that's why when people would question, say, the law of attraction, or does this stuff really work? And I'd say, I know it works, but I'll tell you why it doesn't work. And that's because most of the rest of the time in your life you're spent worrying and focusing on what you don't want. And then you want to wonder why your prayer or your other purposeful intention, deliberate intention, isn't working, because when you are not otherwise doing this, you're sabotaging it the rest of your day. Yeah, so all of our thoughts and feelings count. It's just that when we enter this special, what my friend Dr. Len Lasko says, loving presence, you know, resonating with the truth of who you really are, then, as he showed in his research, actually with cancer cells, that when you just enter into this loving presence, you can change the reproductive rate of cancer cells. But when you do the loving presence or this deep meditative state along with your guided imagery, you can more than double the lessening of the reproductive rate of cancer cells. Yeah.
And that's the thing, is that a lot of patients have some expectations or some limiting beliefs and some things that are preventing to open to this infinite potential.
Right.
that can heal them.
Right. When Dr. Martin Rossman and I co-authored the chapter on mind-body medicine and Dr. Andrew Weil's newest text, Integrative Oncology, that was the one thing we were clear to comment about, is the ubiquitousness of the placebo effect, or a person's expectation or belief. And the thing that we do as their doctors that we believe honestly makes as much a difference beyond, or as much as anything we do medically, is their beliefs and how we instill these beliefs through how we say and interact with them. And so I was pleased, and I reported in Why Love Heals even bedside manner. There's research now, I know even in The Lancet, a major medical journal, reported a survey of 25 studies, all really supporting physicians' bedside manner and patient outcomes. Yeah, so one way I like to explain it that I think will be a good image for your audience is can you imagine or remember sometime when you were in school and it was demonstrated to you if you took a magnet and then put a card over that magnet and spread iron filings over that card. The iron filings took the shape of the force field of the magnet, right? That's what love does. When we are resonating with this truth of who we are, or that quantum field, however you want to say that, when you introduce love, it literally causes the molecules of your body to realign with their natural, most resonant state. Yeah.
But for that love to be really present, again, there's those limiting beliefs, or there's those fears, and there's those other things that prevent that to fully take place, because it is miraculous. It is the energy of the universe. It is the universe. It is God. It is, but there is those things that prevent it. There is, so that it allows the love to expand and be present.
And to flow, because it simply is. So that's why I say stress, by definition, for me, is anything that is in opposition to love or oneness.
Yeah.
Which means, of course, in all illnesses, to some extent, stress-related. So when you, in fact, and that's why I love what you're doing, when we can educate people to more of the fact of who they are, and then open to that, then their potential is limitless for whatever they want to experience in life, more joy, more health. In fact, as you align yourself with this truth of who you are, then I say health is a natural consequence. It's not like you have to go after health. It's everything is simply going to function better. And this force field of love, however you want to label that, simply flows. You know, from other cultures they may call it ki or chi or prana. There's so many ways we've tried to identify this field that have a more spiritual connotation, but now there's the science suggesting the truth of this. It's just the label we want to give it.
So how do we truly align to this field?
Well, you will love this too. It's about being authentic, but authentic means being yourself. And so one of the things I found in writing Why Love Heals and trying to understand what love even is there was a wonderful book written, it's very academic though, I must warn you, called Character, Strengths, and Virtues, and it's almost 800 pages. And the authors looked at all of the scientific and philosophic literature to come up or discover that there are 6 core virtues that are across all of the literature and all religions or philosophies. And then what they proposed after doing this was that maybe, in fact, the reason why there is this consistency in what we've been taught over the ages is because they actually have or serve an evolutionary purpose, that it literally would affect survival. So that as you demonstrate love and courage and wisdom and transcendence, I say don't be good for goodness sake, be good because it literally, you reap what you sow. I think that's a wonderful message. If people only really understood that, is you genuinely reap what you sow. So as you resonate with that field or not, you affect the flow of that energy, and then however it's going to show up in your life.
Yeah. So where do you take this conversation from there?
Well, for one, I've revised my program. I've decided with the program that I taught originally to cancer patients, it was very much a model of Dr. Simonton's program, is to update it with the newest research in psychoneuroimmunology and epigenetics and what we know in quantum physics, and generalize it more, and I call it living and thriving. So literally, I'm now going to start to go out and teach live again, and go into hospitals and cancer centers and wellness centers and wherever I can find an audience and teach them what I believe is to be the truth, or so much more they can do beyond conventional medical care to heal themselves. In fact, I have a working title for my new book that I'm only just beginning to think about is, where my first book was Doctor's Orders Go Fishing, I want to create a series, and this will be Doctor's Orders Heal Yourself, and the things people can do to truly heal themselves.
And being authentic with ourselves and others is a big one.
Well, to me, it's the key. Absolutely the key. If you honestly are able to resonate with, be in that place of knowing the truth of who you are. It's, you know, from a spiritual perspective, again, we call it nirvana. It's the greatest reason to, for a practical reason, to meditate, because you'll go to a place that's incomparable. And it's fascinating, you know, I think of Dr. Jill Bolte Taylor's experience in her book, My Stroke of Insight. And here she is a neuroanatomist, and then has a stroke. And she knows about the left brain hemisphere and the right brain hemisphere. And now her left brain hemisphere is compromised. So she talked what it was about to live in her right brain hemisphere. And so your hemispheres know very different realities. So when you can enter more of the dominant use of your right brain hemisphere and get away from reason and logic, in fact, reason and logic can never know this. And that's why science is always going to struggle with understanding the oneness in a very personal way. You can't do it this way. It's through a meditative process or getting into that zone. And another way to do it is through doing what you love. Just whatever you're passionate about. Oh, that's such a great message for people. If you could only learn to get away from what I experienced was people thought it was too selfish. No. Do what makes your heart sing.
But when you really, and we had that conversation with Neil Donald Walsh 2 days ago, you know, when you really face the hardships or poverty or illness or, finding that space, that sparkle of love that can really ripple and grow is sometimes tough.
Oh, it is a challenge, make no mistake.
So where do you start from?
Well, you know...
What do you recommend to people there?
Well, this is where you get into more the theorizing or personal comment, but I'm very comfortable saying that for you. This is not scientific, but as best I can determine, if we talk about a purpose of life, why are we here? And so theologians, philosophers, poets have discussed this forever. So why are we here? And as best I can determine, it's to discover more the truth of who we are, which is love. And one of the comments that Neil wrote in his Conversations with God series, which I loved, was one of the experiences we can have as humans that deepens our understanding of who we are as love is to experience what love is not, in order to more fully appreciate what love is. And I remember one of the examples he gave in his book coming from God, and I thought it was such an unusual example because it was a sports example. You can imagine, of all the things God might have talked about, he talks about football. And he said, you know, if every play in a football game were a touchdown pass, do you realize eventually touchdown passes become meaningless? So you have to have fumbles and interceptions and other plays, or again. So maybe indeed human experience, existence, is this unique school where we can deepen an appreciation of who we really are. And going through some of these challenging times, but when you, and this is so personally, when you have this grasp though of who you really are, and that you're never alone, you can't be, it's all connected, and you always have the power, and then can simply accept an experience for what it is. But that's the challenge.
Yeah, it is. Oh my goodness! And so you must have heard miraculous stories or witnessed.
Oh, I have witnessed numbers of them, make no mistake, but not then understanding this perspective. It was just that when people took the idea of going fishing seriously, and so I remember one fellow, Bud in particular, he, as I would go to different cancer centers, I would meet patients and encourage them to come to my classes as part of their treatment. But Bud, his prognosis wasn't even 2 months. He was in a wheelchair in great pain, but my job is at least to introduce myself, and so I was sure Bud would never be able to come to class, but he did. And then when I was explaining about guided imagery and you can use this to manage pain or whatever else, he was mad. And I remember him leaning forward in his wheelchair, and you can't tell me that. And it was interesting how other patients spoke up. They had their own experience with this. So anyhow, I was sure, well, Bud, of course, isn't going to come back. I was thrilled that he was there. I got my chance to tell him a few things. And also, I gave them a guided imagery audio tape at that time that I had made up specially for people to listen to relax, and otherwise present these very healing images and thoughts. And Bud came back, and he came back, and he came back. So at the end of the 6-week series, he was really buying into this idea of going fishing and doing more of what you love. And he said to me, he said, hey, what do you think about me buying a new boat? Now think about this in a very practical way. If you're, say, Bud's family or someone close to him. The guy's supposed to be dead within 2 months, and now he's already used up 6 of those weeks. And he wants to spend $10,000 on a new boat, and he's got all of his medical bills, etc. What would you say to Bud?
They're crazy.
And here's what I learned was I couldn't tell him to buy the boat, I couldn't tell him not to buy the boat. But what I would tell you after all the years of doing this is basically comes out is live like you're going to live. Well, Bud bought that new boat. And his wife and he said that that summer was the best year they ever had in their lives. Bud did not die in 2 months. And eventually he did die. But Bud took his guided imagery so seriously that when he died, they buried him with his tape player and cassette in his casket. So I've seen things from a medical perspective that simply can't happen, should not have happened. And it's hard as a scientist to say when we factor analyze things, well, it was the guided imagery, because who knows what all else was in there. But having done this enough, and again, since Marty Rossman and I did that chapter for Dr. Weil, there is so much. Marty and I were surprised how much research now exists in mind-body medicine with guided imagery specifically to affect a physical health condition.
And yet this conversation is not widely popular in the scientific world.
No, unfortunately, but it's worse when you think of how much data is available in nutrition and exercise and how it impacts our health. And medical schools still usually don't require their physicians to study it. So there's a great deal more we need to do in making this information more available to the public, but even within medical schools. That's a very serious shortcoming. Yeah.
So how do you go about it, or how do you?
Well, people like
how can we change things?
Dr. Larry Dossey,
that I love, that I've interviewed many times.
Oh, he's the best.
Yes.
So he published my research. He was so interested. We just need to thank other people like you and Larry and others who are writing books and getting out there and letting people know there is so much more you can do for yourself. Never to say that the medical or conventional approaches don't have merit, but there's so much more you can do for yourself. And when I teach, I say to people, over time I've learned to say this is the good news and the bad news. I know what I'm telling you can help you and make a difference. The bad news, you have to do it. So many people, it sounds popular and nice, well, you can do these things for yourself, but in my experience, most people don't want to do that. Doctor, tell me what to do, give me this pill, surgically remove the word, but don't tell me I have to change my diet and I have to, practice fitness or guided imagery or meditate. So that's the scary part. But we can only plant the seeds. We can educate, and then I say it's about increasing your odds. I guarantee you, if you do what I'll tell you, you will increase your odds. There are no guarantees, there are no medical guarantees. But would you like to increase your odds? Well, the placebo effect says that you can increase your odds at least 30% just by being aware of your beliefs and expectations, or in this deliberate way, doing it through guided imagery or prayer. Would you like to increase your odds by 30%? So when I would ask my patients or their families, duh, of course. So there are things you can do that will make a big difference.
There's such a beautiful shift to witness really what we're discovering now and really applying, and more of us are applying in our life, and how that creates miracles. I'm really excited about having these conversations now being possible on a wide scale.
Yeah, and I love being part of it. There's a part where I know when I worked in the cancer centers that it felt like I was walking this tightrope. How do I say what I want to say and not offend an oncologist or someone else? Because I remember one oncologist saying to me one day, well, I hope you're not telling them stress causes cancer. And thinking, well, I know a lot about psychoneuroimmunology and how emotional states affect the way the immune system functions. And so it's just, I found a way to say it and support it, but I just knew there were a lot of people who weren't going to be open to this, so I would teach it, and then you just give it your best shot. And then some people run with it and others don't, but my research supported that it obviously made a difference.
Beautiful. Well, thank you for all your great work.
Oh, thank you for the opportunity to share it. I do love talking about it, and I'm glad to be going back out to teaching it again. Yeah, thanks.
You're getting back? You're going to teach?
I am. I'm going back out to teach.
Internationally?
Yes, and again, I'm calling it Living and Thriving. But also, when we were living in Southern Oregon, I have a great friend. Her name is Sharon Bauer, who is a really excellent psychic. And she's been guided to create a new Academy of Healing Arts and Sciences. And I'm on the faculty and board of directors. So in Southern Oregon, by next spring, so that would be 2012, we're also going to have this Academy of Healing Arts and Sciences where we will train people in all of these various approaches with a decided spiritual emphasis on what you can do to heal.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And once we get in this field, it's amazing how intuition then and some new creative ideas and new solution can emerge.
Right. Well, if you understand this quantum field and everything's connected, then it's a matter of simply accessing that field. And, we say that God is omniscient. Well, if you really understand the truth of this, you are an aspect or a manifestation of that God. You just have to access that, all of it, and all information is instantly available. Now, there's one major caveat, and that is where Einstein, for example, said that he got his insights for many of things he came up with in physics through his dreams or other more intuitive approaches. And he said he would have to study for years after he got the insights to make sense of what he got. So the insights are always available, but appreciate that you may indeed need to have a little more knowledge in the area to understand what you're getting. But that information is always available simply by accessing that field. Yeah, and some people are indeed gifted, like my friend Sharon Bauer. And my wife, I was saying you off camera earlier, it's just remarkable. And I've over time learned to develop this myself, but some people are really gifted at their ability to access that, whatever you want to label it, some spiritual wisdom. Yeah.
Well, amazing. Well, thank you so much for this time.
Oh, thank you.
Really, really exciting, and I'm very grateful for this.
Oh, thank you.
Much love, my beautiful co-creators from Oregon. Bye-bye.
Bye. the control group died. And 14% of the men in my group died in that same time period, but twice as many, 28%, died in the control group. So we published that research, and then I wrote my first book, Doctor's Orders, Go Fishing, about the importance of doing what you love, which I know is a favorite subject of yours. And that indeed it affected people's health in a very significant way. But what was fascinating in this discovery process is that most of my patients found it too selfish to go fishing, to do what they really love to do. Their conditioning was everybody else, everything else comes first. So if they weren't going fishing, if it wasn't really the will to live that was making the difference, why did they live longer? And so that was a unique challenge when Dr. Larry Dossey and Dr. Gene Ochterberg, who were editors of the journal who published my research, asked me to comment clinically, which is unusual. Usually you just have to cite lots of other research. So why is it that these people live longer after 12 hours of my program? And that's when I explained to them that in my position as I would go from cancer center to cancer center teaching this program, and over time to thousands of people, is okay, so what about the program really helped you, and even what didn't? And so to shorten this, in the end, they said that it was because I listened, I cared, and I was sincere. I cannot tell you how unprepared I was for that. I comes along and really popularizes this. Anyhow, I was in this position to test and use Carl's program, and we found after my teaching it for about 7 years, we looked back and researched it, and where we were based at that time was where Penn State University is, a major university, and someone from their biobehavioral health department was very interested in what I was doing, so he proposed how we could gather the data and literally measure whether or not it affected survival. And so we were very, very pleasantly surprised to find that with stage 1 breast and stage 1 prostate cancer, that in fact the women who had gone through my program within that time period we measured, none of my women died, but 12% of me. You know, I'm trained as a scientist, and my specialty was mind-body medicine, and I was director of mind-body medicine for a group of 40 cancer centers. And I was very curious about the will to live, and could it affect quality of life and potentially people's length of lives with cancer. And so I was fortunate early in my career to intern with Carl Simonton, who was one of the true pioneers in what we call psychosocial cancer care. And Carl's early research had demonstrated that it could actually affect length of life with all stages and all types of cancer. But the research was not methodologically that sound, and when it's new and different, it wasn't that well accepted. But it was very well accepted by the public, and then someone like Bernie Siegel.
Hello my beautiful co-creators, Lila here on the beautiful Juicy Living Tour, a 12-month tour around the US and Canada and Hawaii. And today I'm in Eugene, Oregon with Dr. Schrock. Hello!
Hi!
Thank you for accepting this interview.
Well, thank you for asking.
And speaking of a topic that really matters, actually the biggest topic of it all, love. And you wrote a book, Why Love Heals.
Yes.
And tell us how you got to writing this book, because this is a national bestseller, but you had before that another book. Tell us about your whole story and how this unfolds, and really you came to now speaking about love and how love and why love heals.
Okay, thanks. Firstly, I must say that a lot of this was a true revelation to me.